How can you leverage experience data to improve your program and how it impacts young people? Well, I'm glad you asked. Before we dive in, you can find the resources mentioned in the video at the Sprockets Engage St. Paul CPI resources page listed on your screen. During this video, we'll be exploring experience data, what it is, how you can collect it. We'll talk about resources for interactive ways, as well as traditional surveys, when you collect it, and its relationship with other areas of data, including an example from the field. Check the video description for the timestamps where you can visit or revisit specific sections. Let's start by clarifying what we mean by experience data. Experience data refers to the information you gather directly from program participants about how they are experiencing your program from their perspective. This is not something that is typically gathered through staff observation. While staff may perceive how young people feel based on their behavior or engagement, authentic youth voice comes from creating opportunities for youth to share directly about their experiences. In short, experience data is about what happens for young people in your program from their point of view. Now let's talk about youth outcome data. This is data or information that reflects the impact your program is having on young people. Understanding the goals of your program is pretty important. You may have already identified specific outcomes that you're intentionally working towards, whether it's academic success, social emotional learning skills, or other skill development. Outcome data helps answer the question, how are young people growing or changing because they are connected to our program? It's important to note that while experience data and outcome data are distinct, they can sometimes overlap. For example, a youth survey or interactive activity might be designed to gather experience data, but also may provide insights into outcomes depending on how the questions are asked or what specific outcome goals are. We'll walk through an example of this at the end of the video. Outcome data can be tricky to collect, and programs can use a variety of methods, from surveys, knowledge checks, or observations, to do so. Today, we're focusing on experience data. We'll talk about considerations in survey design, creating meaningful experiences to hear from participants, and in general, asking questions that allow you to hear directly from your young people. The ideas resources that I'm sharing with you aren't necessarily, they're not validated or research tested methods, but they are practical strategies to help you gather meaningful information about how your program is working from the youth perspective. One other thing to note, we strongly encourage collecting data early in your program. If you're running a school year program, we suggest gathering feedback in the fall. This gives you a chance to make meaningful adjustments based on what young people are actually experiencing while there's still time to improve the rest of the year. If you wait until the end, you risk missing input from those who don't complete your program because they've already decided to leave. And more importantly, you miss an opportunity to improve the experience in real time. And as we know, the quality of that experience has direct impact on the outcomes for young people. Let's talk about methods for collecting youth experience data. There are several ways that you can gather experience data from the young people themselves, and many of them can be engaging and interactive. Interactive methods can include structured focus groups or creating activities that allow young people to reflect and share their experiences. You can design these around a single question or multiple topics, depending on what you're hoping to learn. These interactive methods are especially useful for building trust and encouraging more open responses with your participants. And of course, surveys. Most of us are familiar with surveys, and they remain a valuable tool. You can use paper or electronic versions depending on what works best for your group. With more young people having access to devices, electronic surveys may be easier to administer and analyze, but paper surveys can still be effective, especially in settings where technology access may be limited. The key is to choose the method or a combination of methods that best fit your program and the group of youth you're working with. Before you collect experience data, you need to start with what you want to know. Whether you're using an interactive method or a traditional survey, it's important to start by thinking about what you actually want to learn. You can ask yourself, what kind of environment are we hoping to create in our program? What do we want participants to feel as part of their experience? On your screen, you'll see a few examples. This isn't a comprehensive list, but it includes some common goals. that many programs think about. Maybe you want young people to feel engaged. You want them to have fun. You want them to build positive relationships with both peers and adults. Maybe you want the program to feel relevant to their interests. Young people want to feel heard and to have real opportunities to contribute or provide input. Of course, what matters most may vary depending on your program's focus and priorities, and that's why it's so valuable to take time either individually or with your team to reflect on this. Think through, what are the needs of the young people you serve? What kinds of environments will support the experience you hope they have? By getting clear on that vision, you can be much more intentional in how you design your tools and in the kind of questions that you ask to gather youth experience data. Now let's talk about interactive options for collecting experience data. This is a great resource from Public Profit that shares interactive ways to gather experience data from young people or any stakeholders, adults, volunteers, guardians, or others connected to your program. You can download creative ways to solicit feedback by searching Public Profit's website or by exploring the experiencing data topic on the Engage St. Paul site. It's a great tool to support you to thinking through your data collection process while keeping youth voice front and center. It includes helpful grounding materials and a helpful breakdown of feedback methods by style, including verbal, so things that maybe are spoken or written, visuals, drawing, symbols, charts, and kinesthetic, so those hands-on movement-based activities. And a variety of activities that you can either use as they are, adapt them, or just even use as a springboard for what you would want to do with your group and add your own voice and your program's kind of vibe to it. Interactive engagement methods offer both benefits and challenges. Some of the pros of the interactive methods include having really a deeper understanding. These approaches often provide richer, more qualitative data than a simple survey. They can also feel more accessible to youth. You can adapt activities for the different age groups, language abilities, or learning styles. And it helps with survey fatigue. Young people are surveyed a lot, so using something more engaging can increase their willingness to participate and really share honestly. Interactive options go beyond just that surface level feedback. You're not just getting like, I like it or dislike it, or maybe like a ranking. You're hearing more complex context around why you feel a certain way. And that all sounds great. Who wouldn't want that? But there are some cons and considerations. These may take more time and planning. Interactive methods usually require more intentional design than a standard survey. Data analysis can be trickier. You may need to be more creative in how you collect what you're hearing and code responses or identify themes to summarize what you've learned. And overall, it's like a less plug and play. Once the survey is built, it's easy to reuse, but interactive tools may need tailoring each time depending on the group or context. You can blend methods though. You don't have to choose one or the other. Many programs combine approaches, for example, using a survey to get a baseline feedback and then adding a few low stakes activities to dive deeper into those youth experiences. This gives you both the breadth of information through the survey, but also some depth through the activities and conversation. This next resource is created through Sprockets, and I'm going to share it with you, but it is not a ready-to-go survey. It's meant to serve as a survey question bank, as a springboard to help you think more intentionally about the questions that you could include in your youth surveys. What we've done is compiled a set of examples. These questions, along with the basic kind of crosswalk, in this version, as well as any updated tools as they're developed, will be available on the Engage St. Paul site. The tool is designed to help you explore what kinds of questions you might apply to your program goals. Consider how those questions align with existing tools that are out there, or existing data sets like the Minnesota Student Survey, which does include some out-of-school time measures that allow you to then compare how maybe your young people respond to a larger sample. It reflects on how youth responses might relate to broader measures, such as relationships with adults or engagement or general satisfaction. So to use it, you browse through the question list. You'll notice that each question is coded to help you connect it to your program priorities and staff practices. For example, if belonging and connection are priorities in your program, you can look for questions marked with a B for belonging. And then you can ask yourself, are these the right questions for my program context? Are they phrased the right way? Will they make sense? Would I need to reword or adapt them to fit the age group or cultural context or the program format? Are the staff practices we want youth to reflect on that are not captured here that we would want to add? There are also indicators for other areas like relationships with adults, youth voice engagement, and more, helping you align your survey content with both your quality goals and the youth experiences you hope to foster. Again, this isn't meant to be used as it is, actually, it's too many questions, but to help you identify a set of questions that you might find useful to hear from your young people and how they're experiencing your program. Creating good survey questions takes some intentional thought. This isn't a comprehensive list, but here are some key tips to get you started. Start off by keeping the questions clear and simple. Using simple, straightforward language, especially important when working with younger participants or English language learners. You want to write complete sentences, but avoid overly complex or lengthy wording, and not combine multiple questions into one. So, for example, you might want to avoid asking, do you feel safe and supported? These would be like two separate questions. Next, you want to avoid negative wording. Questions with not or never can be confusing for youth and harder to interpret, like what the actual question is. For example, if it was, rank, I don't feel left out. That's less clear than I feel included. And be cautious with vague words. Words like sometimes, usually, or a lot. We may use those sometimes in a Likert scale, but when you're phrasing your questions, you want to avoid that because they are open for interpretation. Instead, be more specific when possible. For example, you might say in the past week or during this program. You also want to match the language to the developmental level of your participants. Questions should look and sound different depending on the age of your group. First graders will need simple words, possibly visual options. High schoolers, they may respond well to slightly more complex or really reflective language in thinking about their answers. It's important to get feedback before finalizing so that you're not writing your survey in a vacuum. Get input from your other staff members. Does it seem like it's clear to them? How does the tone feel? Does it align with your program goals? You can have youth participants give feedback, making sure that the questions make sense to them. Even a quick test with a few young people can go a long way in making your survey more effective. And designing a good survey also means thinking through how it will be administered. Think about the process. What platform will you use? Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, paper and pencil? How much time will it take? When will you be administering the survey in your scheduled day? Do you have tools to combine and analyze the responses? Can you easily create charts or summaries? And how will the data be shared back with the young people or the staff? And you also want to think about the protocol. This can be easily overlooked. You want to avoid handing the survey to staff without some support to ensure a safe and supportive setting for youth to complete the survey. What will staff say when they introduce the survey? How will you ensure youth know their answers are anonymous and won't affect the way that they're treated? And how can staff set a tone to encourage honest and thoughtful responses? As mentioned earlier, the public profit resource offers helpful guidance not only on designing their activities, but also how to facilitate them or to create that safe and respectful kind of environment for young people. And in the resources around creating the survey and the survey bank of question, there's also information on how to present the survey experience to young people. That survey resource includes things to consider when planning your survey process, sample scripts and phrases that staff can use or customize to match their own style and voice, And these scripts help staff set the right tone, explaining the purpose of the survey clearly and reassuring youth that their responses are valued, their answers won't affect how they're treated in the program, and that there is no right or wrong answers. Being intentional in this part of the process is key to collecting authentic, meaningful feedback and to helping youth feel that their voice truly matters. We've talked a lot today about what experience data is and explored different ways you might collect it in your program. Next, I want to talk through an example that demonstrates how this area of data plays a role in the bigger picture. Let's say leadership development is a core goal or outcome of your program. Here's how you can think about aligning your participation, experience, quality, and outcome data. First, we think about attendance. Why is leadership development important for your target population? So, when you think about who is participating, what importance does consistent participation play in developing leadership skills? And that informs what your attendance goals are, or how the frequency of participation in your program. And when we look at quality data, you could look at the program quality assessment, the PQA scores, whether it's the youth PQA or the SEL PQA. Leadership is reflected in different ways. Are staff creating intentional opportunities for young people to lead? Are those opportunities age appropriate? Thinking about it could be as simple as explaining a game or leading a discussion, or more complex, like organizing a group project. And then when you think about experience data, you can ask the young people directly in your survey or in your focus group or activity. In this program, how often do you or your peers get to lead activities? Have you had opportunities to lead this year? Are open-ended questions. How do you see yourself as a leader? This helps you understand if youth feel like leaders, a critical part of building identity as a leader. And then last, that outcome data. Sometimes staff can observe young people demonstrating and growing as leaders. Maybe they're motivating others, taking initiative, modeling positive behaviors. But it's important to check, is this observation an intentional and documented way of collecting that information, or anecdotally, do I feel like I see some people some of the time, right? And so we really want to think about what are we finding out around how young people either feel about how they've grown as a leader, or what is it that staff see, and do we recognize those actions as leadership? So here's a real example. One Sprockets partner focused on leadership development with immigrant and refugee youth, many of whom spoke English as a second language. Staff believed youth were growing as leaders, and that was what their program was all about. But their data didn't demonstrate that they were quite meeting all of their goals in the program. Their PQA scores didn't reflect that leadership opportunities were being created by staff, and youth didn't see themselves as leaders in the surveys that they completed. Staff had to pause and reflect. They realized that while youth showed up consistently and were actively engaged, staff were still the ones always at the front of the room. Leadership hadn't really been defined with youth in a culturally or developmentally relevant ways. So here's a bit of behind the curtain for how that partner used their data connecting staff practices and experience data at their huddle. The planning of their commitment to action was informed by these different tools, illustrated in this crosswalk. They used the Survey of Academic and Youth Outcomes, which is called the SAO. It's a tool used to measure outcomes with a version called the SAO-S, which is completed by staff, and observations which captured the perceived outcome data. This program didn't use the SAO-S. They used the SAO-Y, completed by youth, which captures their experience along with outcome data around their sense of competency in certain areas. The SAO-Y was the tool that they used to hear from young people. They also had a youth program quality assessment. So at that time, they had an YPQA observation, focusing on the quality of staff practices and program environment. They had an external observation, and their report didn't reflect practices that created opportunities for young people to lead, where adults were stepping aside for young people to take that leadership role. I want to make a quick note. While Sprockets no longer provides resources for the SAO tools, some programs still use it. But even if you're not using SAIL, this concept of connecting what staff practices, what they're doing, with the experience that they're creating for young people is still highly valuable. If you want young people to have specific kinds of experiences and to develop particular skills or outcomes, then it's essential to think about how is your program structured? What do staff intentionally do to create those experiences? And how can you measure what's happening for young people? This is how these two tools helped show the connection between staff practice and youth experience, which we know leads to that developing youth outcomes. Our partner program used these two tools and realized that to improve youth experiences that do impact their outcomes, they needed to strengthen the opportunities they were creating. And that meant looking closely at staff practices. At their huddle, they created a commitment action. It included planning and choice, giving young people real decisions to make in their activities and learning. Specifically, their plan was to have young people create a binder with a variety of icebreaker activities to use at the beginning of each session. They also wanted to focus on creating leadership opportunities, creating space for youth to take initiative and lead by doing the daily icebreakers while staff would participate alongside the group. They also thought that what it means to have a shift from adult-led to adult-supported spaces and being really intentional about where youth have voice. And the other thing that staff thought about would be intentionally pointing out and celebrating examples of leadership when they occurred. While that isn't called out as a specific connection in this crosswalk, they recognize that as English language learners, being explicit and using non-evaluative language as was important for participants to recognize when they were demonstrating leadership. By doing this, they helped young people realize and recognize in themselves their leadership, not just acting like leaders, but that they were exhibiting leadership. This is an example of the power of the activator cycle. This program was a good program already. The young people had great relationships with staff. They came consistently. They had fun. They had friends, and they felt included. But by participating in the activator cycle, the program took time to better understand the impact of their program. They took time to look at multiple data sources, identify where they aligned and where they might have disconnects, and use their huddle as a space to explore those gaps and adjust their practices. This is how data tells a story. Not just numbers, but insight that helps you grow your program with young people and not just for them. So that's an overview of how we explore using data, experience data, and leveraging that, whether through interactive activities or carefully crafted surveys. The goal is to hear directly from young people about how they are experiencing your program. It's a reminder that when we listen closely to young people's voices, we gain insights that can guide our growth, challenge our assumptions, and ultimately lead to stronger, more youth-centered programs. Check out these and other resources at the Engage St. Paul website on your screen.